I've never really bought into those old maritime superstitions about ship cats bringing good fortune to a crew. To me, it always sounded like a comforting myth invented by desperate men trapped on wooden planks in the middle of a brutal ocean. Warships are mechanical slaughterhouses built from iron that contains gunpowder, and a stray animal isn't going to alter the trajectory of an incoming artillery shell. So, when I first heard the story of a single black and white cat that supposedly survived the violent sinking of three different massive combat vessels in less than 6 months during the World War II, I figured it was just exaggerated naval propaganda to keep up civilian morale. But if you look at the actual British Admiralty logs from 1941, there's a specific, quite detail, a written description of how that cat reacted when they pulled him from the oily Atlantic water that makes you realize there was something far more unnerving happening beneath the surface of that survival streak. But before we get to that specific detail that changed my mind, do me a quick favor. Subscribe to the channel if you want these raw, unpolished pieces of real history. And leave a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and what exact time it is on your clock. I always like to see how far these pieces of history travel. So let's talk about this cat. This cat didn't start his journey with a British name. He belonged to a German crewman on the Bismarck, one of the most terrifying battleships in the Nazi fleet. It was May of 1941. The British Royal Navy corners the Bismarck in the North Atlantic. For hours they pound the German ship with heavy artillery until the hull fractures and she rolls over, taking more than 2,000 men down into the freezing pitch-black water. A few hours later, an English destroyer named HMS Cossack is navigating through the debris fields looking for survivors. The sea is a mess of burning oil and floating wood. Then a lookout spots something. Floating on a solitary wooden plank, bobbing in the swells, is a tiny black and white cat. He is soaked, he is shivering, but standing perfectly upright in the middle of this graveyard. The British sailors scoop him up, dry him off, and they named him Oscar. For 5 months, Oscar lived on the HMS Cossack. The men fed him scraps of dried beef, and he slept on the hammock lines, becoming a regular fixture in the mess hall. In the middle of a war that was grinding men down to nothing, he was just a cat doing cat things, ignoring people when it suited him, demanding attention at the worst possible moments. But the crew loved him for it. When everything around you is designed to kill, something that ordinary feels like a miracle. But then October happened. A German U-boat tracked the Cossack near Gibraltar and fired a single acoustic torpedo. The blast tore right through the ship's bow. The explosion instantly killed 159 British sailors. The ship began to founder, heavy iron twisting under the weight of the water. Amidst the screaming and the smell of burning, a rescue ship pulls alongside to evacuate the survivors before the vessel slips under the surface. And right there, sitting on a floating piece of metal near the shattered hull, is the cat. His whiskers are burned, he is soaked, and he is not happy about it. The crew hauled him aboard and renamed him Sam, Unsinkable Sam. Personally, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this part of the timeline. Part of me wonders if the sailors were just passing the same cat around between ports as a joke, or if the stress of the Atlantic campaign made them project their own survival anxieties onto this one stray animal. When you are watching men die around you every week, and one small creature keeps walking away from things that should have killed him, you stop asking how. You just need the story to be true. By November, the British Navy decided to put Sam on the HMS Ark Royal, one of the most famous ships of the entire war. She had survived dozens of near misses, and the Admiralty figured the lucky cat belonged on a lucky ship. They were wrong. On November 14, another German torpedo ripped into the side of the Ark Royal. The explosion didn't just breach the hull, it knocked out the entire electrical grid. Instantly, the ship went down into the pitch black in freezing ocean. This is where the story gets a bit claustrophobic. A ship is a giant steel maze of narrow ladders and heavy hatch doors. When the power dies and the water comes screaming through the lower decks, it becomes like an iron coffin. The evacuation was slow, methodical, but agonizing, lasting 14 hours as the giant structure groaned under the weight of the Atlantic. In the pitch black deep inside the crew quarters, Sam was completely trapped. Sailors scrambling up the escape hatches could hear water rushing into the dark below them, mixed with the desperate muffled screeching of a cat buried somewhere in an iron labyrinth. Nobody could possibly stop to look for him. You don't look for a stray cat when the floor is sliding out from under your boots and you're about to drown. The massive ship hung on until dawn, finally rolling completely over and slipping into the dark water. When the rescue launch came through the thick burning oil to pick up the last group of freezing sailors clinging to the wreckage, they found Sam. Against every physical law of a sinking ship, he had somehow managed to claw his way out of the drowning internal decks before the air pockets collapsed. He was floating on a broken piece of deck of a plank, gripping the wet wood so hard his claws were bleeding. The officer who pulled him out of the black water wrote in his log that the cat was, and this is the actual phrase he used, slightly annoyed. Not traumatized, not broken, slightly annoyed. Like he had been interrupted during a nap and was waiting for somebody to explain themselves. That one phrase, sitting inside a formal naval log, surrounded by casualty reports and damage assessments, is somehow the most devastating thing in the whole story. After 3 sinkings in 6 months, the British command finally made a decision that felt like military strategy and more like decency. They officially retired Sam from active service. First, they sent him to the governor's residence in Gibraltar, where he apparently spent his days being fussed over by staff who had no idea what he'd been through. Then they moved him to Belfast, to a quiet house with a warm brick fireplace, far from the sound of sirens and the smell of sea. He lived there for 14 years, sleeping in the same spot every night, completely happy and unbothered. He passed away peacefully in 1955. I've looked at the old black and white photographs of Sam, sitting on the shoulders of those tired sailors, and it's hard not to look at his eyes and wonder what he was carrying inside. Those men were going into the most brutal meat grinder in modern history, and they found a weird kind of peace in a creature that kept coming back from the dead. He wasn't a mascot, he was proof. Proof that something could survive this. Proof that the Atlantic didn't get everything. In my opinion, Sam didn't care about the flag on the mast or the geopolitical stakes of the Atlantic. He just wanted a warm hand and a dry place to rest. And somehow, in the middle of all that horror, that was exactly what happened. If Sam had simply given up during that first freezing night on the Bismarck and let the water take him, like it did thousands of other men, nobody could have really blamed him. Do you believe that an animal can feel the weight of surviving things that broke everyone around them? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments.